Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be talking about Christopher Columbus, his early voyages, and how his discovery and his exploration came to shape European views of the New World. This is probably going to be a longer video, so let's go ahead and get right into it. Christopher Columbus explores the Americas. With financial backing from Spain's monarchs, Isabella and Ferdinand, Christopher Columbus sailed west to the Americas. He then returned to conquer the land, exploit its wealth, and convert its people to Christianity. The colonization process launched by Columbus transformed the Americas, Europe, and Africa. Christopher Columbus. To pursue the Western dream, Spain relied on an Italian mariner from the city of Genoa named Christopher Columbus. He sought a route to China not only to find a new trade route, but as a means of reviving the Christian struggle against Islam. By converting the Chinese to Christianity, he hoped to recruit their people and use their wealth to assist Europeans in a new crusade. Columbus dared the westward trip because he underestimated the size of Earth. He believed the planet was 18,000 miles around, almost 7,000 miles smaller than it actually is. So he only attempted this trip because he was bad at math, and he had miscalculated the size of Earth. A calculation, by the way, which had been known and discovered and publicized as far back as the ancient Greeks. This 1519 portrait is one of many that claim to show famous navigator Christopher Columbus. This is the map that shows his different voyages and the routes that he took to the island that he came to call Hispaniola. Viking stories influenced Columbus. An experienced Atlantic mariner as a young man, Columbus had investigated stories about mysterious lands to the west. He may have sailed to Iceland. If so, he probably heard about the western discoveries by the Vikings from Scandinavia. During the 9th and 10th centuries, Viking mariners had probed the North Atlantic to discover and colonize Iceland and then Greenland. From Greenland, some mariners reached the northeastern coast of North America. About the year 1000, they founded a little settlement on the northern tip of Newfoundland, but they soon abandoned it because of the site's isolation and conflict with American Indians. So this early Viking settlement, which was led by Leif Erikson, and this has been proven to have been found because we have found the ruins of these Viking encampments. And they had these settlements in Newfoundland, which is a province of Canada, but they did not stay long because they got into territory disputes with the natives. Whenever they arrived in North America, they called it Vinland, or the land of the vines, because the place where they had landed was overgrown with vines. And whenever they encountered the natives, they called them the Skraelings, or it translates roughly to the ugly ones, because they did not know what they were, because they wore these furs and feathers, and they didn't know if they were man or beast. So whenever they got into a conflict with them, the Vikings essentially had to leave because they just were in a strange land with hostile natives, so they did not stay. They left. But the Vikings were in North America many, many years before Columbus even considered coming over. Columbus sails west. In 1492, Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand of Spain provided 3 ships, 90 men, and most of the funding for Columbus's voyage west in search of China. After 33 days at sea, he reached what we now call the Bahamas. Turning south, Columbus found another set of islands. He supposed that these belonged to the East Indies, which lay near the mainland of Asia. Of course, we know now this is not the case. Based on his mistaken notion, he referred to the people living on the islands as Indians, a name that has endured to this day. So he thought that he was in the East Indies, and if this land is supposed to be called the Indies, well, the people living there must be Indians, and that is where that term comes from. The presence of native people did not stop Columbus from claiming the land for Spain. As the representative of a Christian nation, Columbus believed that he had the right and duty to dominate the people he found. Now, this is going to get into how Christopher Columbus is not a great guy. It kind of puzzles me about why we even have a holiday dedicated to him, but that's not the point of this video. I have a quote here from Christopher Columbus's journal, dated October of 1492. It says, "They should be good servants and intelligent, for I observed that they quickly took in what was said to them, and I believe that they would easily be made Christians, as it appeared to me that they had no religion. I, our Lord being pleased, will take hence at the time of my departure 6 natives." So, what does that mean? Kind of translated to modern day. These people that I've encountered are easily fooled, and whenever I leave, I'm going to kidnap 6 of them. So, Christopher Columbus is not a great guy, and as we continue on in this video, we're going to see more examples of just how not a great guy Christopher Columbus is. Columbus continued to explore the islands of the Caribbean. He established a fort on the island he called Hispaniola. Then, in early 1493, leaving a number of men to guard the fort, he returned to Spain. So a year later, after he starts his voyage, he returns back to Spain to report on what he's seen. Later that year, Columbus returned to the Caribbean to colonize Hispaniola. The new colony was supposed to produce profits by shipping gold, sugar, and Indian slaves to Spain. Once again, slaves. The Spanish planned to dominate the natives and forge an empire. Columbus was to be governor of the new Spanish territories. So Spain had already promised Columbus that he was going to be in charge of this new empire that they were going to build in the Americas. Upon his return to Hispaniola, however, Columbus discovered that the local people had killed the men he had left behind to guard the fort. Columbus turned to force, employing the military advantages of horses, gunpowder, and steel. Columbus killed and captured hundreds of local people on Hispaniola and the adjacent islands. Unfortunately for Columbus, reports of his cruelty and mismanagement during his second and third expeditions prompted the king and queen to recall him in 1500. Columbus returned to Spain, was deprived of the governorship, but made a final expedition to the Americas before he died in 1506. The Spanish colonization of the Americas, however, continued. So, whenever Columbus dies, he dies still thinking that he made it to China. He still thinks he's in Asia. Whenever he died convinced 100% that he had made it to China, whenever, in actuality, he was nowhere close to China or India. The Spanish built an American empire. Until his last breath, Columbus insisted that his discoveries lay close to the coast of China. Other explorers, however, demonstrated that he had reached the margins of 2 previously unknown continents. In 1497, John Cabot, a Genoese mariner employed by the English, sailed to Newfoundland. In tropical waters far to the south, a Portuguese fleet commanded by Pedro Alvarez Cabral discovered the coast of Brazil in 1500. A year later, Amerigo Vespucci, another Genoese mariner, explored enough of South America's coast to deem it a continent. European mapmakers began to call this newly discovered continent by a variant of Vespucci's first name, America. Between 1519 and 1522, a voyage begun by Ferdinand Magellan succeeded in encircling the entire globe, filling in even more of the increasingly detailed picture of Earth. Now, in current day, we take it for granted that we can look at a map and we know what the entire planet looks like. But back then, we had hand-drawn maps. You know, they were taken down by people that were sailing around and seeing things and drawing maps as they saw them. So their maps are going to be incredibly inaccurate. So the maps that we have today, we kind of take for granted. This 1507 map was the first to call the lands of the Western Hemisphere the Americas. How accurate is the depiction of the Americas on this map? So if we look on this map, we see the Americas to the left there, or what they're calling the Americas, and I don't know about you, but that doesn't look like any map of the Americas I've ever seen. So it just goes to show how these early maps were wildly inaccurate. Cortes conquers the Aztecs. At the start of the 1500s, the Spanish learned of a spectacular Indian empire in central Mexico. Those soldiers who explored central Mexico and defeated the Indian civilizations were called conquistadors. In 1519, the brilliant and ruthless Hernan Cortes led a group of about 600 volunteers from Cuba to the coast of Mexico. Born in 1485, Cortes had university training as a lawyer. An ambitious man, he left Spain in 1504 to try his luck in Cuba, where he became rich by acquiring plantations and gold mines. But he hungered for more. This is going to be a common expression. This is going to be a common motivation that we're going to see for a lot of explorers going forward. They want more. They want more fame. They want more gold. They want more territory. These are going to be the driving factors behind a lot of exploration at this time. Marching inland, Cortes reached the great Central Valley, home of the Aztec Empire. The approach of Cortes' army alarmed the Aztec ruler Montezuma. Hoping to intimidate them with his own power, Montezuma invited the Spanish into his great city. So Montezuma sees this army approaching, and his idea is to not show any fear, to show how powerful he is by inviting them in. Now, his idea is, well, if I just invite them in and I show that I'm not afraid of them, well, maybe they'll back down. Maybe they will move on. Maybe they won't attack me. The largest and richest city in the Americas, Tenochtitlan, occupied a cluster of islands in a large lake. The population of about 140,000 dwarfed Spain's largest city, Seville, which had about 70,000 inhabitants. The Aztec city's central plaza of tall stone pyramid temples dazzled with a combination of red, blue, and ochre stucco. Bernal Diaz, a soldier, recalled, "These great towns and pyramids and buildings arising from the water, all made of stone, seemed like an enchanted vision. Indeed, some of our soldiers asked whether it was not all a dream." So these soldiers are amazed by what they see. They see these people that they view as savages and these people that they view as no better than beasts. Well, they have these wonderful buildings and all these dazzling gems, and this place is amazing. So, they've been looking down on these people, but they're starting to realize, wow, these people have a lot here. And that's why it says, seemed like an enchanted vision, seemed like a dream, because it was so impressive to the Spanish. The city's gold and silver inflamed the Spanish desire to conquer and plunder. By seizing Montezuma, the Spanish provoked a violent uprising during which Montezuma died and the Spanish were driven from the city. Returning with reinforcements, including many revenge-seeking local groups who had themselves been brutalized by the Aztecs, Cortes captured Tenochtitlan. The cost, however, was high. 4 months of fighting reduced the city to rubble. So, in the first fight that Cortes takes the city, they are able to capture Montezuma, the leader. However, he's going to die in this this conflict. Montezuma is, and the Spanish are going to be driven out. Now they're going to return later with reinforcements, and they're going to get some of the local tribes, because the Aztecs had been themselves conquering neighboring tribes and towns and villages. So the Spanish are going to go to these people that have been attacked by the Aztecs themselves and be like, hey, why don't you join up with us? We're going to go teach the Aztecs a lesson. And, well, these people see this as a way to get out from under the control of the Aztecs. So sure, let's join up, let's join forces, and let's go kick their butts. And after 4 months of fighting, the city is reduced to rubble. The victors put thousands of captive Indians to work on a Spanish capital, Mexico City, on the ruins of Tenochtitlan. The slaves reused stones from the Great Pyramids to build a Christian cathedral. They transformed the shell of Montezuma's palace into a residence for Cortes. Grateful for the stunning conquest and a share in the immense plunder, the Spanish king appointed Cortes to govern Mexico. So, Cortes has a successful raid on the Aztecs. He goes in, reduces their city to rubble, and captures thousands of them, forcing them into slavery to essentially destroy their own city, what was left of it, and rebuild a city just for Cortes. And in recognition for Cortes's service to Spain, the Spanish king appoints Cortes governor of what is now Mexico. The Spanish extend their empire deep into North and South America. During the 1530s, Francisco Pizarro conquered the powerful Incas of Peru with just 180 soldiers. In addition to their pursuit of wealth, conquistadors were motivated by their religious faith and by loyalty to their monarch. They reasoned that riches were wasted on the non-Christian American Indians. Those riches should belong to the Christians who served the Spanish crown and who were willing to help convert the native people. These notions had been deeply ingrained in Spanish culture as a result of the centuries-long Reconquista. Conquistador superiority. Alright, so this section we're going to talk a little bit about why the conquistadors were able to essentially come in and just roll these people that they had been the dominant power on the continent for centuries. You know, the Aztecs and the Inca were these mighty powers in their day. So how did these people from an ocean away go through this long voyage to even get here, and then once they got here, be able to just take over, even though you would think that people fighting on their home turf would have an advantage? Well, let's talk about what advantages the conquistadors had. The conquistadors benefited from their superior weapons. These included steel-edged swords, pikes, and crossbows. Now, if you don't know what a pike is also known as a polearm, meaning that it's on a long staff, and it has a metal point on the end. You know, similar to like a spear, but whereas a spear is usually used to be thrown, a pike is something that you use to jab. So that's what a pike is. Such weapons were far more durable and deadly than the stone-edged swords, axes, and arrows of the Indians. Because 16th century guns were so heavy, inaccurate, and slow to reload, only a few conquistadors carried them. So the first advantage that the conquistadors have is steel. They have these steel-edged swords, pikes, and crossbows, and this is going to be a major advantage over the stone weaponry of the natives. And while yes, they did have guns and firearms, they were nowhere near to the firearms that we have today. If anything, the guns back then were more noisemakers than actual weapons because they were so inaccurate and took a very long time to reload. However, these guns gave the Spanish a psychological advantage. Belching fire and smoke, they produced a thunderous roar that was terrifying and spread confusion. You got to think, if you had never seen a gun before, and then some guy that came across an ocean, you've never seen him before or anyone that looks like him, and he's able to produce this item that he points at you, and it makes this terrifying noise, and it throws out smoke and fire, and suddenly your friend that was right next to you just falls to the ground. Oh, well, that guy's going to seem like a wizard. He's going to seem like he's some sort of extra supernatural force. This would be the same as, I got my Star Wars shirt on. It would be like if we saw a lightsaber, if you were going to get into a fight with somebody and then they pulled out a laser sword, that's going to be, it might be common technology to them for wherever they're from, but that is going to be a huge psychological blow to you because you're terrified. You have no idea what that is. And he's and that's what these natives saw whenever they pulled out these guns. Now, you know, like I said, they are not like the guns that we had today. If anything, they were more noisemakers than anything else. But that alone is going to make them seem like they're some sort of supernatural being. And that psychological advantage that those guns gave them was huge. Although most conquistadors fought on foot, the few with horses proved especially dreadful. The Indians had never experienced the shocking power and speed of mounted men. The most essential thing in new lands is horses, observed a conquistador. They instill the greatest fear in the enemy and make the Indians respect the leaders of the army. But the greatest advantage came from something that conquistadors did not even know they carried: disease. Horses, as we know them today, were not native to North America. So, whenever the conquistadors come and they brought horses over, well, they see people mounted on horseback, and they don't know, like, is that two different beings there, or is it one? Are they one individual, or they come apart? They didn't know what they were looking at. They had never seen that before. So, and the speed that they were able to move was baffling to the natives. But the biggest thing that gave the conquistadors an advantage was disease. Disease devastates the native peoples. Brutal exploitation and disease combined to reduce the population of the Americas. When Columbus established a settlement on Hispaniola in 1492, the island's original population numbered about 300,000. By 1548, the island's population declined to a mere 500. The Spanish forced the natives, known as the Tainos, to labor in mines and on ranches and plantations. Those who resisted suffered deadly raids on their villages by colonial soldiers. Overworked and underfed, the native population was especially vulnerable to disease. The ravages of these diseases were not confined to Hispaniola. In the century after the arrival of the Europeans in the Americas, experts believe that the successful epidemics reduced the native population to about 1/5 of its pre-1492 numbers. So these diseases that the Europeans bring in, the natives aren't going to have any resistance to. And that is going to wipe their numbers down immensely. The great European killers included smallpox, typhus, diphtheria, bubonic plague, and cholera. These were diseases that had existed in Europe for centuries. As a result, the European population over the generations had developed some natural defenses against them. That is, among the population there was a percentage of people whose bodies were able to fight off the diseases before they became fatal. This is immunization. You know, like how we will get vaccinations and shots today, the people, just by being exposed to it over and over and over again, had built up a tolerance to these diseases, the Europeans. But whenever these diseases that the Europeans brought with them, and they didn't even know they had them because their body resisted it, but whenever they were around these natives, the natives had no resistance to it. And that's why these diseases were so lethal to them. The native populations of the Americas had not built up such natural defenses. While Europeans also carried disease from the Americas back to Europe, American Indian populations were devastated by this exchange of infections. In some cases, entire villages simply disappeared. Okay, here is a graph that shows the American Indian population and how the steep decline that it goes under as the years go by. The Columbian Exchange. The Europeans who had began arriving in the Americas in the late 1400s brought more than weapons, disease, and a thirst for wealth and power. The colonizers also brought plants and animals that were new to the Americas. Indeed, the European arrival brought about an ecological revolution. Never before in human history had so many of the world's plants, animals, and microorganisms been so thoroughly and so abruptly mixed and dispersed. We call this phenomenon the Columbian Exchange. So we're going to talk about the Columbian Exchange for just a few minutes here. Potatoes from Peru became an important staple of the European diet due to the Columbian Exchange. Exchange of plants and animals. Determined to farm the American land in a European manner, the colonists introduced their domesticated livestock, including pigs, horses, mules, sheep, and cattle. They also brought seeds for their domestic plants. These included wheat, barley, rye, oats, grasses, and grapes. In a land where large mammals, such as cattle and horses, did not live, the new plants and animals brought drastic changes to the environment. Roaming cattle and pigs consumed the wild plants and the shellfish that the Indians needed for their own diet. The livestock also invaded the Indians' fields to consume their maize, beans, and squashes. So these new animals that the Europeans are bringing over are just going to run wild in the Americas. And there's little to no competition for what the animals are going to eat besides the natives themselves. The peoples of the Americas adapted to the newly introduced plants and animals. In time, they learned to raise and consume European cattle. On the Great Plains, the American Indians acquired runaway horses. This enabled them to hunt bison more efficiently and resist efforts to colonize their land. While exporting domesticated plants and livestock to the Americas, the Europeans imported productive plants from their American colonies. Maize and potatoes from the Americas produced more food per acre than traditional European crops, such as wheat. European farmers enjoyed larger harvests by adding or switching to the American plants. Europeans also adopted tomatoes, beans, peppers, and peanuts. This improvement in the European diet led to a European population explosion. So, one good thing that came to Europe from all of this was that the Europeans are going to have a much more rounded diet at this point. They're going to get all of these new fruits and vegetables from America brought back to Europe. And they're going to plant them in Europe and grow them and make them spread them around. And with all of this new food that is going to be healthy and good for the Europeans, it's going to help their population expand. The Columbian Exchange and global population. The Columbian Exchange helped trigger enormous population shifts around the world. Larger harvests aided by new American crops fueled European population growth. From about 80 million in 1492, Europe's population grew to 180 million by 1800. That growth nearly doubled Europe's share of the world's population from about 11% in 1492 to 20% in 1800. Meanwhile, the American Indian proportion of the global population collapsed from about 7% in 1492 to less than 1% in 1800. So while this exchange helped the European population grow and expand at a massive rate, the native population in the Americas shrunk drastically. This is a graph that shows the rate at which the European population had grown. So if you see from 1492 to 1600, you know, there's solid growth, but then after 1600 it just shoots way up, and that is due to the Columbian Exchange. Okay guys, that's going to be it for this video. I know it was a little bit on the longer side, but if you have any questions, you can always send me an email, leave a comment on the video, message me on Schoology, or just ask me the next time you see me. So I hope everybody is having a great day, and I'll see you again real soon.